Good morning. I see you are well after the gala. I'm glad. I'm glad to see so many people. The panel here is the purpose of the panel is to promote interest of AIB researchers of the underused data set of the World Value Survey. Whether Geert Hofstede will confess or whether he will really say what he said, we will hear that in a minute. But basically, the real purpose of the one goal of this panel is to promote interest in this free database, but underused. But it's a jungle, and for going into the jungle and see the adventures and sort of the interesting points there, we need some tour guides that have actually used it and have come out of the jungle with results. So we have gathered a panel of people with very good experience who will sort of show us some of the issues to address using the World Value Survey and roads to take. So this is the order of the presenters. These are the topics that they will cover, and I would like to give the floor to Geert Hofstede.
Well, good morning, everybody. The responsibility for the title of this session is not mine. It's this friend of mine who got this from one of my talks, and he thought it was a nice way of attracting people. I will first tell you what is it. It's what's going to do it again. What is it? This is how it started and what led to my 1980 book about cultural difference between countries. In the period 65 to 71, I was a psychologist and a management trainer with IBM Europe. And I traveled widely. I visited all the subsidiaries in Europe and also in the Middle East. Actually, I came to Turkey for the first time in 1965, did some research here, so I'm quite familiar. I think Istanbul was a much nicer place at that time, I can say. Not so many people. But I didn't have time really to do research. I saw my task as collecting information and reporting it to management and to the employees, which was very important at the time. And I got involved in activities of surveys, and that's what had started already in the United States and the United Kingdom. And in the period that I got data from, 67 to 73, there were two waves of data collection, and there were more than 100,000 questionnaires, not more than 100,000 persons, because a lot of persons took it twice. So there were about 70,000 different persons involved. And after the first 6 years, I got a sabbatical leave from IBM, and finally I had time to look at the more fundamental questions that these questionnaires we collected had raised. And I saw that there were some questions, especially those dealing with values, that seemed to have a national pattern. And I had, at that place where I was, the IMD, it was at that time called IMED, I had students, management students from different countries, and there were about 15 countries where I had sufficient students to really make a sample, and I gave them the same questions I was wondering about in IBM, and I discovered that most of those questions, they reproduced exactly the same order of countries. And of course, that was very interesting. So I reported to my boss at IBM. I was supposed to come back, and I said, well, this is very interesting. We have information which nobody has, and we should make it a research project. Unfortunately, I had a new boss, and he was an ambitious fellow, and he saw the future of his work somewhere else, and he said, no, this is too academic, give it to a university. And they said, well, sir, in that case, I will join that university. So this meant I left IBM. And the next 6 years, I scrabbled my living together more or less from grants from different schools and universities to analyze the data, and especially related to other sources. At the same time, I also taught at INSEAD Business School in France, because I needed an audience to test my ideas on. And in 1980, finally, the book appeared, which is called Culture's Consequences, first edition. And then I brought in this idea of dimensions, because I had found that I could simplify the difference between countries into 4 factors that I found through a factor analysis. Okay, now something about the other databases. At the time I did this, there was no such database at all. This was the first that ever existed that had comparable data of matched samples of a large number of countries. And in the beginning I used 40 because I had a rather conservative estimate of the number of answers I needed. Afterwards I found out that I could lower a number of people I needed from 50 to 20, and then I had 53. And then this book came out at a time that culture just became popular. It is also the time of corporate culture, Peters and Waterman, which some of you will remember. And so there were people who also wanted to compare countries, and they started to do research projects mainly with students. In 1980, studies tend to be mainly with students. For example, of Michael Bond on the Chinese Value Survey. And in the 90s, there were also samples of teachers and of managers. And this idea of the World Value Survey, a European Value Survey, of sampling a sample of the entire population over age 18, started in 1981. And it started in 6 European countries in the Department of Sociology of Religion. And this is because especially the Roman Catholic Church was concerned about secularization. And I was told that actually the first round of the European Value Survey was financed by the Vatican. And then afterwards other countries wanted to join in, and it became less religion-oriented, and the central coordination went into the hands of Ronald Engelhardt from Chicago, and it became a World Value Survey. And I already saw the first results of this 1981 survey in 1983, because there was a famous French sociologist at the time, Jean Stetzel, who published in French a book, La valeur du temps présent. And I devoured that book because it touched upon a number of the things I had been studying. And I found that several of the things he found correlated significantly with my data. But I tried to contact the European Value Survey people, but they were not interested. They said, no, it's our policy not to share our data with others. That was, of course, not the way to do it. I was very happy when Engelhardt came in and he opened it up for everybody. And now, in the meantime, there have been 5 waves of World Value Survey and over 100 countries involved. The only problem, if you try to work with it, is, first of all, there's so many data that you get lost. And secondly, not all questions are used in every wave, and not all countries are in every wave. So you have to find out where you can get the information you want. Okay. Now I've been concerned because we're integrating this World Value Survey, which is basically more beautiful because it takes samples from the entire population and not just from the subsidiaries of one company. Although I must say that in cross-cultural comparison across countries is a matter of getting matched samples, of getting the same kind of people in one country and another. And the subsidiaries and the various jobs in the subsidiaries of IBM were extremely well matched. We had exactly the same people doing exactly the same work, or even the same, we could separate it by gender, women and men. However, the nationality was the only thing that differed, and that was the variable I was studying. The interesting thing is that the World Value Survey, with all its data, was never used by practical people very much. I have hardly seen any management article that is based on World Value Survey data, whereas there is enormous use, that surprised me, of my dimensions in management training, also in research, in management issues like, for example, mergers between companies, in marketing, nowadays also in medicine. I have become a co-author in various medical articles, to my great surprise, where they look at the differences between doctors and treatments and so between countries. And even in the missionary field, you have people who give who prepare missionary to go to other countries to preach their religion, and they use this information about values. The latest edition of my book for students, it got more collaborators, fortunately, and there's another Hofstede who happens to be my eldest son. There is Mr. Minkov, who sits there, and we now have 2 dimensions. We have beside the first 4, we have 2 dimensions that actually are based on World Value Survey data. So we got the data, and so there is a 5th and a 6th dimension. I think that probably Michel will say something about that. Now you could also see that the original 4, which were already made before the World Value Survey became, 3 of them can be visible, are recognizable in questions from the World Value Survey. The one that is not reproduced, or hardly, is masculinity versus femininity. And this is my last remark I'm going to make. Why is masculinity and femininity not found in the World Value Survey? And I use the title of an article I wrote before, Researcher's Mind versus Respondent's Mind. And surveys, obviously, do not answer questions that are not asked. And the prejudices of the people who make the questionnaire influence also the kind of things they get answers about. Now, there is a difference between the World Value Surveys. It is mainly made by social scientists who sit and think and say, these are the questions we have seen that are important from an article such and such, so we have to add them to the questionnaire. The IBM survey questionnaires were composed by us going to employees, more employees than managers actually, in various jobs, in various countries, asking what was on their mind. And we were fighting sometimes with people from one country and people from another country in the survey team, whether certain questions were relevant or not. But as to the extent I could influence it, if somebody thought they were relevant, we put them in. And in practice, this masculinity and femininity has been frequently validated. And it's also a very important dimension in explaining consumer behavior. But if you look at the World Value Survey questionnaire, which is this, then you see that it contains the values related to the masculine pole, because it was made mainly by people with an American background, and America comes out as a very masculine country, but they did not include the other pole, that you cannot walk on one leg. And so the word femininity even is a taboo in the United States. If people use my work there, they usually don't talk about masculinity versus femininity, they talk about achievement versus something else. And but that is the reason why it is there, but it isn't found, because of the biases in the minds of the people who make up the World Value Survey. So if I was going to use the World Value Survey, I would insist that I use all the questions. Thank you.
We have 10 more minutes. We have mics up here, so if you have questions, please approach the mic, and the panelists will answer questions at their ability. I hope.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for a very interesting panel. My name is Cheryl Cadero, and I come from the University of Gothenburg. I'm originally from Singapore. So, Geert Hofstede, your studies have very much interested me, and then multi-level analysis, because your studies have talked about national cultures, and what I understand so far is that it is an average, which is very useful, it's very applicable. And I'm looking at nation-wise, but sub-level. So for example, in countries that are going through transformations, Turkey, Egypt, Singapore, where I come from, where I find that Singaporeans are finding their voice in new media, social media, and expressing their likes, dislikes about how the state is governed. How might I then apply cultural dimensional construct, if I were to take that as such, in sub-level national sub-level? Would I do that by using dimensional constructs within dimensional constructs, which I think is interesting? And how might I also apply a multi-level? Can I peg, for example, the dimensional constructs according to levels of existence within a nation? Different sections of society have got different levels of existence, different needs. Would that cultural construct concept be useful as such? I would just be very happy to have any thoughts and advice from you. Thank you.
Yes, I don't know whether I completely got the question. It looks to me it's more like the issue which Mark Peterson has been discussing, actually. So you could also say that you remember the story of the man who always said, the doctor who said that for difficult cases you had to go to his neighbor. This is the same practice I'm doing now.
Okay. To know whether culture ideas or culture measures will apply at other levels, you have to check. If you're dealing with NUTS level 2 in Germany, NUTS level 2 in Germany consists of 16 Bundesländer. It's going to be difficult to check measurement structures with an N of 16. You can try, but difficult. NUTS level 2 in Germany is 36 or 38. It's more likely you're going to be at least check there. So one point is don't assume that measures will apply. Check. Do the kind of ordinary measure design things at whatever level that you want to use it at. Of course, it's helpful to also think a bit. There are some circumstances, like as I understand the regions of Turkey, they are centered around cities. My guess is that you, with the help of Turks, can interpret possible cultural differences between geographic areas linked to cities. If you get too far down in the United States, you get into funny administrative areas that are designed so that all Democrats are well represented in one county and all Republicans are represented in another county. You get funny things. You have to check pretty carefully. Second thing, be very careful about sample sizes. There's with Jean-Luc Arago and Xavier Martin. I did an article in Jibs recently about multi-level modeling. A key problem is that we also were editing a special issue, and a key problem was that people kept submitting manuscripts with an N of 12 at level 2 and 4 predictors at level 2, and you just can't. The significance levels aren't interpretable. The standard errors are not stable enough. So take care. Otherwise, you do qualitative things. You know, if you can use numbers, then don't use numbers. You know.
I would like to add something. I agree completely with everything that Mark said. I have done some work across American states. Some of you who've read my work may know that I'm very interested in homicide rates across countries and why they correlate with some sex-related variables like adolescent fertility, HIV rates, and so on. And I found, and others have found this before me, that across American states, they're reliable data for all 50 American states, homicide rates correlate highly with adolescent fertility rates, exactly in the same way as across countries. So sometimes you do get the same correlations across subnational units, but like Mark said, don't expect that this will happen. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it may not happen, so you have to check.